He was not going to. They have them all
Okay,
from the entire state.
we are at 5:30. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here today on Thursday, September 15th. We're already halfway through September. It's going by fast. Let's go ahead and start off with our roll call. Miss Lister.
Mr. Munoz,
Present.
Mr. Campbell, Dr. Bonebrake, Mrs. Schmidt, not here, absent. Dr. Schumacher, and Mr. Tatum, we know is absent.
All right. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is executive session. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move the Board of Education of USD 501 recess into executive session for 20 minutes to consult the board's attorney on legal matters that are privileged under the attorney-client relationship, and to return to open session in the boardroom at 5:50 p.m. The board attorney, superintendent, and executive staff are invited into this executive session.
Thank you very much. We have a motion. Is there a second? All right, second by Dr. Schumacher. Any questions, concerns? All right, let's go and have a vote. Miss Lister.
And the vote is open. Thank you. All votes are in and the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and go into executive session now. Well, actually, we have one more minute. Ms. List, do we have to wait to that 5:50 since we said it in the motion? Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, it is 5:50 by my watch here. We are out of a session. Looking for a motion to go back into executive session. Is there a motion? Okay, thank you very much. We have a motion. Is there a second? Second by Dr. Schumacher. Any discussion? Okay. Go ahead and go for a vote.
And the vote is open. All votes are in and the motion carries.
Okay, we'll go ahead and recess to go to executive session now. You want to be respectful of everyone's time. It is 6:30. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. It's Thursday, September 15th. Next item on our agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Do we have any special guests who might be leading us in that, Dr.
We
Anderson?
have a special guest. We have a special senior. In fact, he's the best dressed senior that I've seen in 7 years. He's going to come forward and start off with the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you very much for leading us in that. Next item on the agenda is adoption of that agenda. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move the board approve the agenda as presented.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? All right, Dr. Bonebrake, a second. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to a vote. Ms. Lister.
Vote is open. All votes are in and the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lister. Now we move to school highlights. Dr. Anderson.
Favorite time of the board meeting. And what's most important about this board meeting is I'm always interested in who is the first student that comes to mind when you pick a senior of the month. So whoever is the very first student really demonstrates that level of excellence. And then I always wonder who's going to be the very last in May. So our first student, Mrs. Morrissey, will be introducing Mr. Thomas Schmidt, who's here with guests. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Morrissey.
Mr. Munoz, Mrs. Bowley, members of the board, Dr. Anderson, it is always a privilege to present a student of the month, and certainly presenting the first one is a special privilege. The young man standing beside me this evening falls right in line with the excellence that has come to be a tradition of all of our students of the month for all of our schools. And he is a true Renaissance man. First of all, he's got a smile that would melt even the Grinch. And this was not expected. He definitely gets best dressed. He is talented. You know, he is a brilliant young man. He has the second highest GPA in the school on the weighted scale. So certainly he has an ability, but he's also applied himself to make sure that he doesn't just have talent, but that he actually works hard to make sure the talent's used properly. More importantly, for me, it's fun to see that standing before me, we have 4 students this year being recognized as part of the National Merit Program. He is a community scholar for that program. So I think it's like 1.6 million, and he's in the top 50,000, yes. So certainly academics, he has excelled, but he has excelled in every other way possible. He is a participant in both our swimming and soccer. Tells me tonight that he also golfs and would maybe like to do water polo. So he likes to dabble in lots of things. And he's not just talented as an athlete, he's also a leader. He knows how to follow when it's appropriate, and he's a leader. And what I have found with him is he gives back in a lot of ways. He's involved in many other things in school. And I think one of the most important things our upperclassmen do is they serve as league leaders, and they share with underclassmen what it takes to be successful, and more importantly, to be a high school. They help them value the tradition of the diversity, because our school is so important to Topeka High, and he has done that and given back. And in case you thought he was too busy at school with all he does to do anything else, he is an Eagle Scout. I hope he speaks more to that. So he has truly given back in his community. So it is a privilege to introduce to you the first Topeka Public School Senior of the Month, a Topeka High Trojan, Mr. Thomas Schmidt.
So I brought with me my mom and dad.
Hi, I'm Thomas Schmidt. I'm a senior at High. So I'm involved in soccer, swim, I'm in link crew, I'm in Mu Alpha Theta, which is like math honor society. I'm an Eagle Scout.
Thomas Schmidt is, as all of our seniors in the month often are, is a student that really rises to the top for a wide variety of reasons, and he's kind of a Renaissance man. He's someone who just lights up a room. He has a smile that just makes you smile back.
Thomas is a exceptional person all the way around. We could spend all day talking about his academic skills, his athletic accomplishments, but I think one of the things that I like the most about Thomas is that he's a great person.
I came from a very small private school. Coming from that to a school where there's like 1,600 kids, like that's such a drastic change. Like I'm wanting to do everything. I want to go to all the football games. I want to go to all the events. I'm looking forward to graduation and throwing my cap with everybody, all my friends, throwing that with them, and that's just such a cool experience. I think that I'm looking forward to that.
So Thomas is a pretty driven student. The one thing that really sticks out to me about Thomas is, honestly, I could definitely see Thomas being somebody that a lot of people in this school look up to. He could step up and be a leader in a lot of capacities and a lot of different facets of his life.
I don't know where I'm going to go or necessarily know exactly what I'm going to do, but what I'm kind of at right now is an engineering major with a business minor. Math's my baby. I enjoy math. I love math. In terms of academics, I would definitely say I drop everything to go to math.
He is not only an active part of his school and someone who believes he needs to leave it a better place than he found it, but he has done that in his community from a very young age, and he has understood that it is in giving back that we truly leave the best of ourselves.
My favorite quote, there's two types of people in the world, those that think they can and those that think they can't, and they're both right. And I think that that's generally true. It's about like the mindset that you put on yourself and that you express to others is, I can do this, I'm gonna do this, and it'll happen. No matter what you're going through, whether it's trying to get an A in class or trying to beat somebody in a swimming race or soccer game.
Engineer, now, engineer. Someone who does precision guesswork based on unreliable data provided by those of questionable knowledge. Like I was saying before, these are my parents. My mom, Tammy, and my dad, Sean. Both Schmidt.
Well, congratulations on this recognition, and you know, it's well deserved. It sounds like you're up to a lot at school, which is great, and obviously there's lots of potential doors in front of you to pick from. Let's go ahead and start with a couple of questions from my colleagues here. Any questions for Ms. Bowley?
My question is for your parents, so you can stand up again. So what have you done that's made such a remarkable son that you believe is parenting advice for many of us?
Oh, Joy. Okay, hello. You didn't tell us that we were supposed to be prepared.
I'm sorry, I didn't tell them either.
Okay. Kids, need to be able to make their own choices, but they need to understand there are ramifications to their choices. There's value in talking through things. There's value in them having lots of experiences. And there's value in them learning from those experiences.
Really good advice. So what would you say to your parents? What have they done for you that's made you so spectacular?
So they really pushed me either academically or in terms of scouting. Like my dad's the that word, yeah, the scoutmaster. Whew. The scoutmaster in the troop. He's been pushing me to do scouts ever since I was born. Something really cool about my family with scouts is like all of my uncles are Eagle Scouts, all of my cousins are Eagle Scouts, and I was the last one in that that generation to get Eagle Scout. So they really pushed me in terms of scouting to get to Eagle Scout. They really supported me. They supported me academically, whether it be helping me figure out a problem or telling me to figure it out myself, which I think are both very useful.
Other questions for
Thank you.
Mr. Schmidt? Yes, Dr. Mowbray.
Anywhere in the Midwest, if you do postgraduate school, you can go anywhere you want. I was accepted at 4 medical schools. The tuition was pretty high, but I went to Chicago, Northwestern. But I think one thing you might consider in college, wherever you go, see if they have a foreign exchange student program that might prove invaluable. I spent a year in Germany. I don't use German very much, but I was exposed to a lot of different cultures and ways of doing things. So that you might consider a university that has a foreign exchange program.
That's definitely something I've been thinking about because Topeka High also, they have foreign exchange students coming here to our school, and last year I was really good friends with a lot of them. And so just like I agree, seeing those connections and seeing that like the differences between their country and ours is just really cool. So I agree. I'd love to be a part of that. I'll keep that in mind.
Question, yes.
Congratulations. This is a very big deal. And being an Eagle Scout also, very big deal. My father-in-law's one. And anyway, it's congratulations, huge accomplishments. So of course, we love all of our schools in Topeka Public Schools, but here on this board, Topeka High seems to be pretty well represented. I have a son at Topeka High, and our two missing board members have children at Topeka High, and Dr. Schumacher has a child at Topeka High as well. And Mr. Munoz will next year. Anyway, so that leads me to my question. Prior to Topeka High, you mentioned you were at a small private school. So why Topeka High and why Topeka Public Schools?
So I'm gonna blame this one on my sister. She came to Topeka High first, but to me the decision was between Topeka High and Marshall Monroe because they're both, in terms of academics, were the higher two, and I just liked the culture of Topeka High, the diversity of Topeka High better than Marshall. That's something that I don't think a lot of schools can say is the amount of diversity that Topeka High has.
Yes, Dr. Schumacher.
Thank you. I'm going to piggyback on that. And for people going into high school, whatever high school it may be, what made your transition from that smaller school to a pretty big school with a lot of different types of people in it? What helped you with that transition?
The biggest thing was finding like that small group of friends, and then you're able to branch out and talk to different people, just getting involved in clubs, sports, link crew, literally anything. Just making friends, finding people that have similar interests in you. People that might be in similar situations are also good people to look for. So just branching out, talking to people.
Right. Thank you.
Ms. Bowley.
So I see that you like math, and we could always use math teachers at Topeka High. So I just thought if Dr. Bonebreak was giving you some advice, I would just throw that in there.
So something that I really enjoy doing at Topeka High, just in general, is talking to my fellow peers about like the math class that we're in and helping them work through. So a math teacher is definitely something that I might be interested in the future. But
We will work on that on our part in time for you to come back. So, well, again, congratulations on all your hard work. We look forward to hearing a lot more great things here in the next coming months, and I look forward to seeing you on the stage at graduation.
thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And the final highlight, we do want to mention, however, as we get ready to share the next highlight, which is our proclamation. Okay, so for 2 board meetings, this meeting and the next meeting, we will be celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. And it ends on October 15th, which really, there's not just a month. You really celebrate all year long, all of our cultures. But for this particular highlight, we're going to kick it off tonight with the proclamation. Dr. Mejia, our Director of Cultural Innovation, will be reading that proclamation. She also had a slideshow that was playing prior to the meeting. I will be playing that slideshow as she reads that proclamation as well. In addition to, as Dr. Mejia comes on up, in front of you, you also have for tomorrow, just a reminder, do go to Friday's event at Pine Ridge. It is their birthday. And I believe Ms. Robbins is at 10 years. I think it's on the shirt. I think it's 10 years, but they're almost 7. So, and so they have, a shirt that they brought for you. The birthday party is tomorrow. And I believe you have information provided for you in that regard. We want to thank the principal of Pine Ridge who's watching online, who came just before you guys walked in the room and dropped off these shirts. Now for Dr. Mejia, there she goes. We're going to turn it on over to Dr. Mejia.
Good evening, Mr. President, board members, Dr. Anderson. Proclamation of Topeka Unified School District number 501, Hispanic Heritage Month, September 15, October 15, 2022. Whereas each September 15 through October 15 is set aside to commemorate the contributions made by Hispanics throughout our nation's history. And whereas it is a month to reflect not only on the past, but also on the future role of Hispanics in the United States. And whereas the Topeka Public Schools joins its fellow citizens in recognizing Hispanic Heritage Month as a means of celebrating the Hispanic contributions to our country's culture and heritage. And whereas it is fitting that the board, staff, and students of the Topeka Public Schools USD 501 join the observance, now thereof be it resolved that Topeka Public Schools Unified School District number 501, Topeka, Kansas, does proclaim September 15th through October 15th, 2022 as Hispanic Heritage Month to celebrate through activities and programs that enlighten and inspire our understanding of the amazing heritage of our Hispanic students, family, staff, and community. Absolutely. So 33% of the students here in Topeka Public Schools are of Hispanic heritage. Or Hispanics fully. We, as you know, are the only preschool through 12th grade dual language program, school and programs in Kansas. We celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month in recognition of the impact that Hispanic Americans have had in the United States through literature, through art, through music, through science, and multiple other areas, sports, and how American citizens with ancestors from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central South America celebrate this holiday as a way, again, to celebrate the accomplishments. And it was enacted into law on August 17th of 1988. Thank you.
Any questions from board members, are there going to be, will we be able to have access to know when there might be celebrations at some of our schools for us to be able to?
Absolutely. We are gathering, and I already have some coming in, and Mrs. Wallace as well, of all the celebrations and different activities that schools are doing. And there's a great variety of them. We will be happy to share with you, Mr. Munoz,
That would be great.
and
I
the
know
rest of the board.
Robinson reached out to me and I'm sure that they'd love to be able to reach out to the rest of us. So
Yeah, and for parents that are watching, it's on the Google Calendar on the district's main webpage. The district calendar has those listed, but the C News comes out on Friday. So on the Friday C News, there'll be several highlighted items. So the next board meeting, for anybody that's just raring to go for a board meeting, come to Ross because they will have their music teacher is of Hispanic heritage. And so I guess for a music program of some sort or a song or something musical to occur at Ross in light of Hispanic Heritage Month. Additionally, Mrs. Gorsuch, the new principal of Scott Dual Language, she'll be coming, sharing some either art or activities and giving some highlights from Scott Dual Language as well for the month. And so Ross and Scott both will be highlighted while we are at Ross Elementary in the fine arts and in the academics in this space. But yes, sir, we'll also have highlights in the community news.
that's great.
I can share two things that are happening because I am privileged to have been invited as a guest speaker at Robinson Middle School to the EL classroom where students will interview me. There is a plan. They have selected some questions, so that will happen next Tuesday, as well as Jardine Middle School invited me as well to be part of three periods for a short period of time where they have different questions, just looking into further, immigrating to a different country, what it means to be Hispanic, how, there are a variety of questions, and I really appreciate having been invited as a guest speaker.
That sounds amazing. Thank you. Other questions for Dr. Mejia? All right, we look forward to hearing all those events that are going to come up over the next month.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
First
Sure.
senior
Okay. Well, that was always fun to be able to meet our students, our amazing students here at TPS. Next item on our agenda is public communication. And I believe we do have a number of individuals here. First off is Miss Josie Torres. Ms. Torres, would you come on up? So great to see you. I'm going to go ahead and read a statement here, Ms. Torres, before you speak, and we'll go from there. Please come forward and state your name and address for the board, your address for the board. You have 3 minutes to address the board. We ask that your remarks to the board be respectful. If you should have a complaint against a specific employee, we ask you to submit your written complaint to the superintendent. If the complaint is against the superintendent, please address your written complaint either to me as board president or to the clerk of the board. Thank you so much.
Hi there. Thank you. I'm Josie Torres. I live at 1832 Southwest Webster here in Topeka. And I'm here today to request that American Sign Language be offered at Topeka West and Highland Park as a second language class. Just a minute. I had a tooth pulled today. Hold on. Okay, I'm fine. ASL is already offered at Topeka High. 2 of my grandchildren attend 501, one at Topeka West and one at McEachran. Catalina is 8 and in the 3rd grade, and I've watched her since she was born. I taught her sign language, which I learned when my youngest son was attending TARC due to autism. He didn't talk till he was 4. So TARC taught us how to communicate with him. And that sure did help with his frustrations and on what he wanted and what he needed. Catalina wants to be a sign language interpreter when she grows up. She knows about 200 signs that we use at church or at the playground. And I'm hoping that you guys can please help this class become a reality and available to all students in high school level that wishes to take it. I also have something else to say. Just a minute. Okay. I didn't know that we had to sign up ahead of time to talk to you guys. In my day, when I used to come a lot to the board, we could sign as when we got here. So I talked to Miss Lister and she told me go to the website, and I did, my handy dandy app and GPS app, and I couldn't find it. So I went to her, she couldn't find it. So you guys are not getting a lot of people to talk to you because it's very difficult. When y'all get home, go to your phone, try to sign up to talk to yourselves. And it's very difficult to do. So that's just one thing to consider. But I thank you so much for listening to me, for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Ms. Torres. So great to see you. Next item, next individual I have who signed up for public comment is Mr. Gibson. So would you come on up? And again, I'll read this statement. You've heard it before, but I'll say it again. Please come forward to state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes to address the board. We ask that your remarks to the board be respectful. If you should have a complaint against a specific employee, we ask you submit your written complaint to the superintendent. If the complaint is against the superintendent, please address your written complaint either to me as board president or to the clerk of the board. Thank you.
Jeremy Gibson, 1980 Southwest Fraser. I'm here to speak today about policy 1036, which is the public comments portion of the regulations. We should be talking about today. I just a lot of things. Real quick, a couple of meetings ago, it was mentioned that there might be some look at time constraints or expanding time or doing a variety of different things. I'm here to speak on behalf of myself to say that the time limit could be expanded. There was mention of the 5 minutes. I would be in favor of that. I would not be in favor of there was also a mention of maintaining 3 minutes and then at the conclusion in finish your speech in order that speech to I guess to make copies. One of the big things that I take out of the comments is it gives a person a chance to express publicly and on the record how that into is eventually get to cyberspace. And then individuals comments can be there. If we were to hand over the remainder of the speech, that speech would not be heard. Just give it to you that just caught my attention. I know it's just made in possibilities and it caught my attention to recognize it. I should probably say something.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gibson. Is that all our public comments, Ms. Lister? See, is there a Mr. Rebecca Revell here? No. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for addressing us here during public comments. Moving on to the next item on our agenda is disposition by consent. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move the board approve the items of business by consent as presented and authorize the board president or superintendent to sign the special project and purchasing contracts for and on behalf of the board.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Okay, Stuart Campbell with second. Any questions or comments? I do have one item I'd like to have addressed, which is there's an agreement with the state to provide fresh fruits and vegetables to some of our elementary schools. I wonder if someone could speak to that.
And Mr. Robbins, I believe Ms. Yaki is in the hallway. Wants to come up and talk a little bit about that. She's proud and excited about that. Mr. Robbins, is that okay, sir? Ms. Yaki?
Had it for many years. It's a federally funded program, and it is designed to give the little ones a taste of fruits or vegetables that are a little unique, and parents may not buy them for them at the expense. So they get the opportunity to try it, and then if they like it, they can encourage their parents to buy it for them.
Okay, that stood out to me. I'm not sure if I'd noticed that before, and that's why I sort of wanted to make sure that everybody just know that we obviously are serving, feeding lots of kids, and this particular program, it just sort of stood out that we're making sure that it's healthy, that we're encouraging them to be able to eat things that are good for them. And
yeah, we serve unique things like fruits like persimmons, things that you wouldn't see every day and are seasonal. Rainbow carrots, white asparagus, things like that. And they just get a bite of it to try it. And there's usually, there is supposed to be an educational piece to it where there is a gal that works at Scott that writes up a little letter and tells everybody at Scott what the produce is and what it's good for and where it's grown and what it does for your body.
And this is an annual grant with the state, is that right?
The school has to apply for it. Okay. Usually it comes out in April and then it's decided by May. This year it was just a little bit different, but the principal has to write how the program is going to work in their school.
Okay. All right. Well, that sounds great. Anything that we can do to encourage this is always worth the effort. So thank you so much for answering that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Seeing no questions, we'll go ahead and move on to the vote. Ms. Lister.
Vote is open. All votes are in and the motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Next item on our agenda is Superintendent's report. Dr. Anderson.
This particular meeting is a board work session, and in the work session, policies are the topics in which you'll be addressing. So I'm going to turn it back over to the board as you have your policy discussion to talk about board operating policies. I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Munoz, and the policy committee that'll be reporting out at this work session.
I'll be happy to turn it over to somebody from policy committee. One second.
Oh, Ms. Whiteman, I
Okay.
think you're going to start them off and then guide the rest of the board through.
Good evening. You have in front of you 20 board policies. This is in the series 1000. And all of the policies relate to board operations. My role, I've been asked to just summarize each one briefly and then open it up for questions. These are the existing policies, which means once they've been adopted by previous boards and a few of them amended by you already. But once it's adopted, it has the force and effect of law. The policies are there because most of them are required by law, Kansas statute relating to how boards operate. And we'll open it up for questions. The board policy committee reviewed a few of these at their last board policy committee meeting and discussed them, and they asked that this series be discussed and at least reviewed by the board at this meeting. Now, any of them are subject to change, and the board policy committee may bring changes and use any comments or questions you have as we review them to make further changes and bring them back to you. But any policy recommendations that come from the board policy committee will come back to the board for action. The first one is 1005, and it talks about the mission statement. All school boards have mission statements. And you will recognize the engage, prepare, and inspire words that are on all Topeka 501 publications. In addition to that, there are listed 10 learning principles. I'm not going to go through each of those learning principles, but they are there for you to review. And at the bottom of each policy, you will see a policy history. That is legally recommended so that if there's ever any litigation about a policy, then we as attorneys can go back and look at the revisions. They do the same thing with statutes in Kansas. The legislature, every statute, Kansas law that's published has a history of the last time it was revised. So, but those principles of learning, certainly this is a mission statement that the board may review at any time and consider changes. 1010, the next one is dealing with the goals. This policy was amended this year by the board, and the amendment basically added to the goals, the goal requirement of the board to adopt goals. What was added was basically statutory language. The goals set forth in the statute by the Kansas legislature when they adopted the Gannon School Finance. They basically, the legislature at the time said, well, if we're going to provide all of this money, new money for education, then we're going to set what we expect students to achieve. So when you look at those achievement 1 through 7, those are really what the legislature expects all school districts in Kansas to be delivering. And then when the students graduate, that they have these types of skills. So that's statutory language. These are capacities that we want the end goal that all students who graduate from Topeka High School to possess. You will have next to that a regulation. And your policies are in policy book are organized with the policy is the policy of the board. The regulations are proposed and given to the board by the superintendent to implement the policy. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the regulation because the regulation language is mostly procedure, although those can be cleaned up and brought to the board also for approval. The next one, 1020, is a code of conduct. This is a code of conduct that applies to school board members, and it addresses 3 areas of conduct. One is community, how you represent the board and the district and the community, and then how you work. Number 2 is how you work together, how you function as a board. These are mostly aspirational, that striving. This is how individually and collectively you will conduct yourself as an elected board member. Number 3 is basically sets forth from A through I your role in working with the board. Remember, in Kansas, the law is very specific. Every district has to have a superintendent. The law is very specific. The superintendent shall manage the district on a day-to-day basis, subject to the rules and regulations of the board. So this sets forth those expectations. Again, those can be changed by the board, by board action. 1030 talks about your powers and responsibilities. This policy basically reflects where you get your authority. And of course, school boards are constitutional bodies. You are mentioned in the Kansas Constitution. It basically says that local public education in Kansas will be governed by locally elected boards. And it also indicates that you have what's called, just like the legislature, but it's a different kind of power related to operation of the local district. You have executive, legislative, and judicial authority. You have legislative authority in the sense that you can adopt a proposed legislative program and request from the legislature or advocate or speak for that legislative adopted program. What you as a local board in Topeka think would be best educational legislation to help meet the needs of the students in the district. Notice down there at the very last line, the board may transact all school district business and adopt policies the board deems appropriate to perform its constitutional duty. And it uses the same languages in the Constitution that you maintain, develop, and operate local public schools. Now, remember, the school board basically controls or manages the district in 6 ways. First of all, by adopting handbooks, by adopting policy, evaluating the SOUP. You have one main employee, that's a superintendent, giving direction and to the superintendent. And then the biggest role is the negotiated agreement, working and adopting on a yearly basis changes to the negotiated agreement, which governs the rights of teachers and their employment with the district. Is a very important role in that area. 1030-1 is a regulation. It deals with really legal counsel and getting outside legal advice if the board should ever determine that they need outside legal advice or they need to hire an outside attorney for some specialized litigation. 1031 deals with actually the board operations, your officers, president, vice president, clerk, treasurer. All these positions are mentioned in Kansas law, and the duties are set forth very specifically in the law. One of the reasons that Kansas schools operated very transparently and without a lot of issues related to managing money is that the statutes in Kansas are very specific. You have to have a separate treasurer, you have to have a separate clerk, you have to have a superintendent. These 3 positions are statutory positions. Basically, the law says the SOUP can't be the clerk can't be the treasurer can't be the clerk or the SOUP. Very specifically designated positions that have specific duties in the law. You will note that maybe some other states have had issues with transparency and money. They don't have the same statutory setup that Kansas does. And Kansas has done a good job of making sure those positions are distinct and they are not intermingled positions. Goes on to talk about the president as the presiding officer. Basically, this is statutory. If at any time the president cannot operate, then the vice president by statute steps in and it's sort of a line of succession there. And then number 3 deals with the statutory language related to the superintendent of schools. Basically, you appoint a superintendent for 3 years. And then the language from the statute, they basically manage the district on a day-to-day basis, subject to the rules and regs of the board. And then your policy also addresses the position of the board attorney. Any questions so far? We've covered a lot of territory. Yes, sir. Doctor?
It says the superintendent has to reside within the.
It doesn't say it has to. It says the board encourages.
Okay.
Any person initially operated, and that language is there simply because like the city has recognized that residency requirements can limit the pool of applicants for certain positions. Most school districts have given up residency requirements or don't have them for teachers or superintendents. But it does, your policy says encourages.
So it's unnecessary.
Well, it allows you as a board, if at any time in the, in the next 10 years, you hire or in the position to hire another district leader, then you could at least bring that issue up. You could remove it if you want to. That's your choice. Policy, anything else? Any questions? Policy 1032, board meetings, basically covers the open meetings law that all board meetings are to be public, except for executive session. And then it talks about regular meetings and allows special meetings to be called by the board president or any board members. And then deals with if someone wants a point of privilege, they can request that, and talks about your regular meeting order. And again, that's detailed non-consent items, the superintendent's report, action items, discussion items, board member comments. This is basically your agenda. Adjournment. There is one down there the board may want to look at, and the policy committee could certainly look at it first and brings any changes they want. But under F there's some language that allows the president to set some time limits for board members speaking. That may have been a result of this policy was changed in 2010, 16, and 19. It may have been an issue in the past. It may be something you want to look at and maybe change. Special meetings, adjourned meetings, and closed executive sessions, again, reflecting current law. Any questions about that one?
I do have a question. Have you seen other boards look at this within sort of the framework of Zoom and the policies that, we might think about? Is there any implications with having others who have had Zoom meetings, sort of making sure that is there anything to worry about?
The Kansas law has, and the Attorney General's opinions about school board meetings, it's been fairly broad enough so that when Zoom occurred, everything went on as usual, because Kansas law has always said that board members may participate via telephone conference. Like if you're on the road traveling for business or out of the state, you could still participate with the school in a school board meeting. It used to be we only had telephone, but now, so because of those Attorney General's opinions, interpretations, everyone just, moved forward with Zoom. But I've not seen any special changes because of Zoom. It's just another media or way of communicating that allows busy people to participate remotely.
Thank you.
Any other questions? 1033 deals with agendas, and this is often a frequent question. How, as a board, new board members ask, how do I get an item on the agenda? Board policy basically says that the superintendent, in cooperation with the board president and other board members, will set that. Board members may request the president that items be placed on the agenda, whether or not they are directly involved in the agenda development. And that language is flexible, that any board member can request any item to be placed on the agenda. I only remind board members that be careful, because what may be a big compassionate interest to you may not be of interest to the other 6 members. So be mindful of their time. And if as a board member, you talk to 1 or 2 other board members, if they're not interested in it, it might be a sign that others may not be either. And it may not be, your time is very limited. You want to spend your time at board meetings, taking care of business of the district, and not get into issues that are not critical to managing the district and taking care of the big issues. This requires the superintendent to distribute background materials concerning agenda items to boards prior to the meeting. School district staff members usually spend at least 3 to 4 days preparing agendas, getting everything ready for the board meeting and providing documents, every document for your approval. The goal is for the board to make informed decisions. So all of that paperwork and all of those documents put together on the agenda are for you to help assist you in making informed decisions. I always encourage board members, if you have questions about anything in the board agenda that you receive in the documents from this lister, please call her or the superintendent before the meeting. That way it helps to facilitate the meeting and get you the information you need to make an informed decision. The next one is 1033. This is really all the work that goes on behind the scenes to get the agenda materials ready. It's pretty much procedural information, but there is always as soon as one board meeting ends, then the preparation for the next one begins, and then after the board meeting ends, the follow needs to be followed up and reviewed. Policy 1034 deals with transaction of business. And this is what I call in the law, the rule of 4. It takes 4 votes, 4 board members to act on anything. Otherwise, the board has not acted. Legally, you act when 4 members vote. It does talk there. That's where it does say it allow electronic voting. So that does help to facilitate that. It also addresses any potential conflict, and this is statutory. Kansas law basically says that if a board member announces a potential conflict of interest with regard to a certain motion or resolution before the board, leaves the meeting until the motion or resolution is disposed of, and abstains, then you're counted as not voting. If you sit in your seat and do not vote when Ms. Lister opens the roll, then she has to, by statute, count you as a no vote. So if you don't want to vote on an issue because of a legal or ethical conflict, you can always leave the room and then you can declare a conflict, leave the room, and then you'll be counted as just not voting or abstaining. 1035 talks about your rules of order. Basically, rules. There are very few rules of order, procedural rules on how you conduct motions and business, but they do list the most common motions that you will use: recess, take action, amend a motion. Your policy allows that if one of you makes a motion and then another board member decides that they have a great amendment, you can allow that friendly amendment, we call it, if the person making the motion agrees to the friendly amendment, then everyone will vote on the friendly amendment. Do note under C3 there that if you vote on an acceptance or non-acceptance of an amendment, that doesn't commit you to voting on the main motion. So you take one vote at a time, and if you vote no or yes on a proposed amendment, it doesn't bind you to support the motion. Notice that you do have under F, adjourn. You have a motion to adjourn at the end of the meeting. And then it basically says, if something comes up, then Robert's Rules of Order applies. Robert's Rules of Order is meant for large bodies of 200-300 people. So we don't recommend Robert's Rules of Order, and there are very few times when Robert's Rules of Order ever come into play. Public participation, 1036. This is a policy that you had, you basically approved an amendment to this policy this year. And it dealt with the language about if an individual has complaint against an employee, then we cleaned up that language and said that it really has to be addressed according to your policy at the lowest level possible and not at a board meeting. So if someone wanted to show up and complain about an employee, your policy would say, we have to refer that to the superintendent according to our policy for resolution, and then it can, the superintendent will report back to you as a board. But this is a policy, I think it's only.
I believe we also made a change for each patron will be limited to one appearance.
Oh, right. And there are, and the policy committee did discuss at their last meeting, looking at the issue of how many minutes. I think that was, you reported in your meeting.
The language made it sound like they could only come before the board once, one appearance.
Right.
And then we led into the discussion. So I think we changed some language to that they can come at any time during the year, not just one appearance.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that clarification.
And then that opened the discussion for the 3 minutes to 5 minutes to turning notes in, et cetera.
So, and the board policy committee will more likely be reviewing this again and may come back to the board with recommendations.
Well, is this a time for us to talk about this?
Certainly, if
Okay.
you want to. Now, the policy committee will have to make a recommendation. It'll come back to the board for discussion, but sure, any questions or comments about this right now?
Okay, well, I was thinking about Mr. Gibson's comments, and I think they're very valid. And I was curious how other people feel about that, extending it to 5 minutes, so it's public record. So I know that the policy committee will make that call and bring it back to the board. So do we discuss it then? So do I bring this up at our next policy committee and then we discuss it?
Right, you would,
Okay.
the policy committee would discuss it, make a recommendation, and then the recommendation would come back at that time.
To be discussed later. Okay.
Unless any of the other board
If-
members have any other
I
comments.
mean, if you're asking, where do others sort of feel about making any sort of changes? I don't know. The rest of you all have any thoughts on that?
I'm comfortable with having the policy committee discuss that and then bringing it back. I don't know if I have a feeling either way right now.
Others, I mean, I don't know that this is a problem to address. I mean, most of the times 3 minutes seems to be enough. I very rarely have anybody ask us for more time and more time. But that's just based on my sort of experience on here in a couple of years. And I don't know what you think if you've noted that that's an issue to address. But
Can't they ask for more time?
They can ask for, and sometimes I've given, just a couple, 10-15 seconds to sort of wrap it up, but
Yeah, you can do that. As board president, you can.
Yeah, okay, well.
but something
we
for
could
you all to discuss and
that,
see what.
Like extending it to 5 minutes and also something else. It was, somebody asked me, it was when a student addressed us during public comment, you know how we ask people to give their address. And the comment was that it didn't seem quite right asking a minor for their address. So perhaps that's something else that we should discuss in policy committee and get that language in here, because I agreed with that comment about not having a minor have to say their address.
I can't remember the time a student was. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. I can't, I'm trying to remember
Yeah.
after students here. Okay.
A few times.
That might be something to look into. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Moving on, 1037 allows the board to create committees And those committees, if they are board created, become open meetings also. So boards don't often create committees, but sometimes there may be a need to do that. Any other committees that are appointed by the administration are administrative meetings and not open to the public. But if it's a board committee, say you wanted to, some districts have done this in the past, want to do a public or a appointed committee to look at the district boundaries, then that committee would be an open meeting committee. And any committee you appoint only makes recommendations to you. They have no authority to act. They just take a public comment and then make a report back to you. Any questions about that? Yes, sir.
This lives in my head, so I figure this might be a good place. So like with DCAC, how we have a board member for each month, but other board members are able to join. There's 4 board members that attend the DCAC meeting. Is that a problem?
If there's 4 board members attending a committee meeting, then someone may request that it be open.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why many times districts will keep their committee members appointed to a certain group to 3 because it doesn't create a quorum. It's a quorum, basically means an open.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like there's almost a standing invitation to board members. And then there's a appointed board member each month. And so then if others want to go, there might always be 3. And that kind of prohibits access maybe to other board members.
And it's always, as a board member, when you go to any meeting, you always want to make sure that you identify and know who else is there as a board, because accidentally you can show up at the same meeting. And you have to be careful about anytime there's 4, if someone sees you talking in a corner, member of the public will assume that you're talking about school business, which you may not even be mentioning, but you have to be careful. So be careful about that 4 and who's showing up at meetings.
I hadn't thought about that. I like to attend DCAC because I always learn a lot. So if 3 other board members, and it's always on Zoom now, but if 3 other board members show up and we're all quiet and just listening. Okay.
As long as you're not making a comment or actively participating in the meeting, voicing your opinion and whatever, the likelihood of someone saying it's a violation of the open meetings is going to be very rare. But it has happened in the past. So, but yes, if you do attend and you realize that there's more other members there, you want to just
leave.
Listen.
Yeah.
So anything else? 1038 is minutes, and that one is accurate minutes. We have a rule in the law that we like skinny minutes, which means your minutes are always available to the public. And it's the first thing the Attorney General always asks for if there is an open meetings violation. So only board, basically the topic, the motion, the vote is included in minutes, not individual comments, and your policy basically says that you will not include individual comments in your minutes, in skinny minutes. Next one is tobacco products, which is 1039. No tobacco products allowed in open meetings or in any school building. 1040 is how you establish your policy. And basically it talks about board policy and the difference between policy and regulations and how those are developed and that you will review them on a regular basis. So tonight qualifies for reviewing your policies on a regular basis. It says any additions or amendments have to be presented to you in writing and included on the agenda of a regular meeting. 1040-01 is all the procedures that occur to recommended policies and regulations before they get to you, so that they've been vetted by numerous groups. I won't spend a lot of time, but compensation, 1050. Usually you learn this after you file for office, but school board members are the only elected officials in Kansas who do not get paid. I emphasize that school board members do not get paid by statute. So you are truly the public servants, true public servants, because you do this because you're interested in education. So pat yourself on the back. The next one is a policy I would recommend. It's a long one, 4560, but it's referenced in your conflicts of interest policy, and your conflicts of interest is 1060. It basically says if you have a conflict, then you need to let it be known, and then the clerk notifies the members in writing as soon as possible, but you're not required to make any revealing of substantial interest if you file a substantial interest form. But conflicts of interest, two kinds. There is generally the easier one to understand is ethical. The other one is in statute. So it's on the green sheet that I've passed to you, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the legal concept, but that legal concept of conflict is if you or your spouse have a financial interest in a business, or you sit on the board of another not-for-profit, or if you're employed by somebody who does business with the school district, then you would have a legal conflict, have to declare it, and that would be one of the situations where I'd recommend declare a conflict, leave the room. That one is solved. The other is the ethical one, and that's usually related to your children, your spouse, your relatives. If you are ever involved in a situation where it benefits your child, your spouse, or one of your relatives, then I would advise you to avoid the appearance of impropriety, declare a conflict, and go vote on it. Not want to be seen as an elected official using your position to promote and help your situation with your children or your spouse or your family. So be very careful of that one, because people will proceed and make judgments about why you're taking this position on this issue if it's only to help. They find out it's to help a relative. So in those situations, I often advise board members, if your child is involved in an issue of discipline at the school, I recommend you not go. Send your spouse, because you never want to be perceived as getting better treatment for your child than for every other child in the district. And the best way to avoid that perception or appearance of impropriety is send your spouse. I have board members in the past who basically would never go to parent-teacher conferences because teachers know you're a board member, and it's sort of the issue unspoken in the room, but they send their spouse to parent-teacher conferences because they're afraid of that issue. But do not use your position to benefit your child unless you're doing it for the benefit of every other child in the district. And that's the ethical one that will always be a difficult one. But this is a policy I recommend that the policy committee take a look at, because it is not your conflict, but the 4560. There's a lot of information in there that needs to be reviewed. 1075 basically says that as an elected official, it's important that you take time and opportunity to educate, learn about the position and the responsibility and roles. The board will travel at state and local, national level to go to conferences and training, so you can visit with other colleagues in other states and learn what their issues are, what they're doing to improve student achievement. And it basically is to promote and improve professional growth in your role as a school board member. 1076 is board member orientation, which is this is part of. Do know though that when we have new board members elected, you allow them to attend the meetings before they take their seat, but they're not allowed to attend executive session. That's because they're not covered by the district's liability insurance. And if you discuss an issue that could result in litigation, they wouldn't have any liability protection. And then the last one is board self-evaluation. Just like everyone else in the district gets evaluated, it's important that the board spend time to evaluate your performance, your goals, and where you want the district to be 3 years from now. Because if we're not moving ahead, we're falling behind. With that, any questions?
None from me.
I'm always available if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
As those policies have been concluded, Mr. Gowan will pull up on the screen. One of the policies that was mentioned was regarding minutes and some light discussion on that item and how you present to the board. We did just double check to make sure on our website, but we will double check the app. Dr. Gray's watching online and just wanted to make sure that at least on the website, for those that are kind of looking at how do you present to the board and how long do you have coming beforehand, that is listed under share your comments under the board and under the board app. However, we'll look at the phone app because that may have been the problem. And I see Ms. Lister nodding her head. So okay, so it does come up on the phone app, but you have to actually scroll a really long time to kind of get to the bottom, that's to get to the share your comments. So we'll look at the formatting of the app so people don't have to scroll to find that, but it is on the main webpage, and that is the link that is posted under the board on the main webpage. Just in light of policy, I thought I'd mention that particular piece. I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Munoz.
Thank you so much. Next item on our agenda is discussion items, proposed policy revisions. Let's see. It was just a discussion. Well, sorry. All right, Ms. Lister, we'll look to you to just give us a heads up on what are the things that we're considering changing.
And I also wanted to suggest to the board members that one of the policies was not placed, and it's in an email from Ms. Lister if you want to take a look at it. And yeah, I'm sorry.
Right, it's at your desk. It should be at your desk. There was one recommended policy that policy committee is recommended to the board that wasn't wasn't in the what you received via email, and it's at your desk. Okay.
So our policy committee has been meeting and looking at our policies. Our policy book, as I stated once before, is about this thick. And so we are looking at that and going over the language in it to try to, yes, there's our policy. There's our policy book. And so one of the things that Ms. Whiteman is such an expert as an attorney is using as few words as possible to state the same things. And so we have been trying to wordsmith this so that it's more accurate to what we need. Some of it's been outdated. And so that's where some of these are coming to. For policy 2010, the academic calendar for the school year, it is a KSA 72-3115. And so it is required that we adopt a school calendar, and that is presented to the Board of Education to approve. And it will state in there, if you look at your material on our discussion on number 1, how many days each grade level needs to have to be legal in the state of Kansas. And so that was one of the changes that we made there. In Regulation 2010, 1, academic calendar. This regulation is deleted as the actual yearly academic calendar is a reference in the board policy 2010 and does not need to be included in the board policy handbook as it changes yearly. Board policy 2010 remains which requires the board to adopt the annual academic school calendar. In policy 2800, student transportation. Our update of the policy to provide that student transportation will be provided as required by KSA 726487, which requires students to transport school to transport students who reside more than 2.5 miles from the school building. And USD 501 transports students who live less than 2.5 miles from the school, depending on our budget limitations. This change would also provide more flexibility as a 2022 legislation passed 2B 215, which allows school boards to contract with transportation network companies to transport 8 or fewer students. Every year when the legislators in their session, we always have to make changes to our policies, what they have approved. And so that was one of those. Regulation 2800-01, student transportation. This regulation is updated to use more concise language and reflect current operational procedures. And you will find in your packet where red is the change in the language or the taking away of the language as you try to follow along, if that makes sense. Okay. Policy 8060, surveying, analyzing, or evaluating students. If you remember this last year, the legislators had big conversations about privacy issues or open knowledge of what's happening in our schools and what data we're collecting on our surveys about their students. And so this was a necessary change that needed to be made. In most cases, we were being very transparent and surveys could be located and looked at. An explanation of the Parent Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment is added to clarify the policy language. A reference to board policy 8065, student privacy policy is added, which addresses the 2022 legislative changes on non-academic student surveys in section 27 of Senate's sub for HB 2567. This policy allows parents to inspect any instructional material, teachers' manuals, films, tapes, or other supplementary material used in connection with any survey, analysis, or evaluation as part of any applicable program. Melanie, did you want to do any? You want me to keep going? Melanie's on my committee as well. So policy 8065, student privacy rights. This was a big discussion on the floor this year. And so some of the policy changes that we looked at and had to change, the policy is changed to add the 2022 legislative changes in Senate sub for HB 2567 relating to non-academic surveys and parent notice and consent requirements. Students may refuse to take the survey even after a parent has given consent. There is an exception provided for students' suicide risk assessment administered in an emergency situation, but the school would need to document the reasonable attempt to notify the parents or guardians and obtain consent, and then notify the parents and guardians of the results as soon as contact is made and provide them with all the information. So our schools need to try to contact those parents before they give the suicide survey. And if they can't, they will have permission to give that, but they must contact the parents as soon as possible and give them the results. We don't want any student not served if we have concerns. Policy 8300, physical examination and immunizations for students. The decision to allow a student to enroll or continue in school without immunization and health assessment is changed to reflect the principal will make the decision in consultation with the coordinator of nursing services. The language "no pupil shall be allowed to continue in school attendance for more than 30 school days if evidence of compliance with these statutes is not provided" is repeated language as the sentence before allows the principal in consultation with the nursing coordinator to exclude students, plus the 30 days is no longer a statutory requirement. So that was still in our policy, but it has been removed. Principals do not generally exclude, well, after you guys vote on the changes. These are our recommendations. Principals do not generally exclude students from school, as each day of education is critical for student success, unless there is an outbreak of a contagious disease and the student has not been immunized. Students are excluded from school during an outbreak of a contagious disease to protect the unvaccinated student as well as the rest of the students and staff. Did anybody have questions on that part? Dr. Bonebrake, it looks like you might.
Offices that would not allow patients or their children to come into the office if they were not immunized. But we are going to allow that now.
I'm going to direct that question to our attorney because of changes in the state law.
School district practice hasn't changed that much, other than the school's policy on this issue is outdated and didn't have the current law. But the rule has been that unvaccinated children, the law says it's recommended and they want them vaccinated, but our law provides for 2 exceptions. And a lot of parents have utilized these exceptions. One is they will claim a religious, it's against a religious belief,
Yeah,
in which case they get a free pass and they will be allowed to come to school. The other one is if they get a statement from a physician that basically says that getting vaccinated could be detrimental to the student's health. So what happens in the practice has been for the last 20 years or so that staff will, nurses service will continue to contact the parents, try to get the student immunized, offer to even help take them to get the immunizations. But many times it is basically a parent issue, and the goal has been not to blame the child or harm the child or deny the child their education. So what happens is they're allowed to attend while the district continues to try to get the parents to get them immunized. But to exclude them and have them stay home is not helping anybody. And then if there is a polio or a smallpox or something, a breakout, the law says you can immediately exclude them. So that's what all the districts that I'm aware of do in Kansas. We have the authority to exclude them immediately if there's a breakout of a contagious disease. So we allow them to attend if there's no contagious disease going on, so that we can help them get a better education and better their lives.
I have a question. The list of all the immunizations that are required. So a parent can say, okay, my child can be inoculated for all of these except polio. Is it like all? Can they kind of pick and choose?
They require, I mean, the policy requires all the required vaccines that Kansas Department of Health and Environment require. And nursing staff will check to make sure that they're vaccinated against all of them or review their records. But there could be a situation where they may not have all of them. They would be more likely encouraged by the nursing staff to get it and say that's a requirement. But again, it's the parents' responsibility to make sure the students is immunized. That's the parent responsibility. Our business is educating the child's mind. So the statute allows districts to err on the side of education.
Right. So we know there are families that don't believe in vaccination. So do we know like what percent of our students are not vaccinated at all?
Very few. So
Very few.
because each year this comes up and we do get a report from Ms. Potter, we'll ask her to provide that. And now that we provide virtual education for elementary and middle and high, families that are uneasy as a result of COVID, really, have selected to utilize the virtual outlet for various reasons, some of which are immunization related potentially. So I will provide that just in the Friday. We'll just send you a little message to let you know the percentage, but it's a very small number. So with many parents, but many could be 3 or 5 or 10, but in a district of 13,000, it's a very small percentage. So we'll be sure to send you that.
Can I speak to this is kind of the next spot. So our list of required immunizations on 8300-01, it looks like it was changed, but some of those are not required immunizations from KSDE. The influenza and HPV are recommended, but not required. And our policy change, it's on page 19 of the packet. It makes it seem like HPV and influenza are required. Page 19, it's the 8300-01, the next in our packet where it says student immunization. In C, in accordance with statute, Secretary of Health and Environment has designated the following diseases for which immunizations are required of all new school entrants. And then it has the strike through and then the list. And within that list are flu and HPV, and those are not per KSDE required.
Do you prefer for it to say required or recommended to further make that an accurate statement in that policy?
Yeah, or I don't know if we would just reference KSDE's form since there are changes to that from time to time.
List off their website, but certainly we could take a look at this. I sent this policy to Ms. Potter and asked for her input, and she provided the list for us. So we certainly could go back and visit with her and then bring that back to you. Or better recommendation would be or recommended. So it appears that she's recommending it, even though KSDE does not require it. So
yeah, I don't want us to be in the situation where a policy requires a flu shot.
Right.
So recommended or required would fix that to make it a more accurate statement. So noted of recommended or required as you continue to finish your policy discussion.
Follow up on that. Thank you.
I do have a question. So about so it's regulation 8300-01, a written statement signed by a parent or guardian that the child is an adherent of a religious denomination, right, whose religious teachings are opposed to such tests or inoculation. So I'm curious, like, I'm looking over to the doctors here, like, does anyone come into your office and is there a particular religion?
Yeah, there's definitely, so for instance, there's certain religions that are against the use of aborted fetal tissue, and there are certain vaccines that were developed with the use of the cell lines come from aborted fetal tissue. And so there may be students that have 12 out of the 15 vaccines because they avoid those 3. And so there's definitely validity and different beliefs that I see as a pediatrician.
People were using religious reasons for not getting the COVID vaccine. That's not valid for pediatrician.
Yeah, I'm not in a position to judge people's religious beliefs. I just think that we follow the policy.
But yeah, thank you for that, because I was curious if there was like a specific religion that stated that. So,
Yeah, that's just an example. There are others.
okay.
Stuart Campbell,
All right,
where are
yes.
you picking up?
Yeah, I'm picking up at 9, right? Regulation 8300-02 vision screening. This regulation is amended to include the new requirements for the frequency and grade level vision screenings required in SB 602, which means cases. Okay, as of July 1st, 2022, schools must provide vision screening annually for children with disabilities aged 3 to 5 participating in IDEA and Part B services, and at least once each school year for students enrolled in kindergarten and 1st through 3rd grades, 5th, 7th, and 10th grades. Right, so all sophomores are getting a vision screening. And we're almost done. Regulation 8300-03 is the hearing screening. So this Kansas law requires school districts to provide students with basic hearing screenings during the first year of admission and not less than once every 3 years. And this regulation sets forth the statutory requirements and procedures, and edits reflect more concise word usage. And 8300-04 physical examinations for students. Oh, I looked over at Dr. Schumacher because, yeah, the health assessments are required by KSA 726267 for all students prior to the admission and attendance in school. And yeah, just a little commentary. I know this is always a big deal, and I know schools often will have like free health assessments, and students can go and get it done like at the very beginning of the school year. If you get it done at your pediatrician's office, get a copy made. Get a copy made. Yep, just do it, because they go disappear. That I experienced that. And I was really glad our pediatrician's office had a copy on file. So the language in this regulation, it's been updated to reflect the current use of the word student instead of pupil. And because we're in America, and to tighten up the word usage. And policy 8320 is communicable diseases, and requires the principal or other person in charge of any school to exclude any child or other person affected with the disease suspected of being infectious or contagious until the expiration of the prescribed period of isolation or quarantine for the infectious or contagious disease ends. And this policy reflects the statutory requirements. And the policy is amended to add the local health officer to the list of individuals under Kansas law who determine if a student has a communicable disease and when they may return to school. And flexible language is added in to address other students living in the same household who may have been exposed to the contagious disease.
When it says local health officer, who does that refer to?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. That used to be a doctor, Italian guy.
I would think it'd be the Shawnee County Health Department.
That is correct. It's now
Yes.
Dr. Locke.
Health
Yes, you
officer.
know,
Yeah.
Right.
Dr. Locke, yeah.
Locke.
I would also like to express to our families that may be listening that 501 does more of the exams for their students, like eye, vision, hearing, than the Kansas requires. So we do make sure our students are being able to hear, see in their classrooms. So just wanted that out there, that we do a nice job of making sure that students have the ability to learn at their highest rate.
Okay, so those were all the changes, right? The,
Yeah,
Down-
those will come before the board on the next agenda, am I correct, for acceptance? And so if there's any discussion tonight,
it seems like a lot of the changes are either one, tightening of the language, or two, an update per the legislature. Okay, is that? Okay. Any other questions about this? But we said that this will come up for next school board, meeting, right? Okay. All right, well, if you have any questions, I'd suggest you all to follow up either with some of our policy committee members or with Ms. Whiteman. Moving on to next item, let's take a look here. Question item, we've discussed action items. I believe there is an action item. Is there a motion?
I move the Board of Education of USD 501 approve the agreement as discussed in executive session and pay the teacher his contracted salary.
All right, there is a motion. Is there a second? All right, Dr. Bowman, second. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to a vote. Ms. Lister. Okay, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is board member comments. Dr. Bowman.
Special education is being underfunded by the state. It's supposed to be paid at 92% and it's getting between 68 and 72%. That's over $3 million a year for at least the past decade. We have a couple of options. Well, three. One, we don't have to do anything, but that $3 million then has to come from the general budget or the LOB. So one, we don't have to do anything, but that means there's other areas that are deficient. Two, we could sue Congress because it's an unfunded mandate and go to federal court. That's a possibility. Not many people have ever done that because we're too intimidated. But it's doable. An unfunded mandate is technically against the law. Our third option, administration has included in your backpack of materials a list of all our senators and representatives and their contact information. I was told by Senator Dietrich, Brenda Dietrich, who's been a past superintendent of schools, that if legislators are contacted, they may be persuaded to decide that since there is a surplus in the state budget, perhaps they could finally fund special education fully. At least the $3 million+ that were owed for the past year each for the past decade. In fact, I think it's more than that. I think it's when KNI was closed, which is I think more than 20 years ago. I don't have specifics on that. So including your packet is numbers. And I wonder if a universal note could be developed that we could just email everybody. Is that a good idea, or is a personal phone call better? Or personal email from each one? That's every senator and representative. The local ones are outlined in yellow. And that might make a significant difference. Yeah, I'm wondering, do you think that would be as effective as individuals acting each of them? hate to take up your time and a bunch of emails, phone calls, because form letter might also.
As a board member? Or would this be more
I guess,
powerful
board
as a
member.
board?
And perhaps as a step, we could go and draft something for the board and attach our legislative one voice, because special ed is mentioned in there, and I'm sure it'll be mentioned again in November when you prepare that one voice. So we could draft proposed language that you might be presented to the full board, and then you all can wordsmith that a bit. And then in addition to that, it could be this and that, not this or that, So perhaps in addition to that, the decision to call individually could also, so you could really have two ways of approaching that.
If we know them personally.
Absolutely, particularly if you know them personally or live next door or just want to send the email or a phone call instead of an email. So we'll draft some language if that's okay with the board, and just remind you of what your one voice legislative platform already says. And we'll add some facts in there about those numbers. So you have that. And we'll give that to the board for discussion, perhaps at the next meeting in preparation for the November legislative session. And then if you want to do other steps, call and email individually, you could do that. Does that sound okay, Dr. Bowbrick?
Sounds great.
All right, we'll provide that.
All right. Next. Dr. Superintendent.
Yes, thank you. My only famous neighbor is Mr. Minky, so. We had personnel committee before the meeting tonight, and we talked about some remaining vacancies and trying to support all the students in our district, and they're doing a lot of hard work in our HR department and going to a lot of career fairs. We talked about 6 career fairs that they have on tap, both general career fairs, but also within the schools of educations to try to get both certified and classified staff. And I continue to very much appreciate those people. And I also appreciate the people on the policy committee. When I close my eyes, I see red and strike through. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Stewart Campbell.
Yeah, I would like to, for thinking of Hispanic Heritage Month, I want to talk about a former student of mine, and I've mentioned him before when he was my student in the migrant education program. He is no longer my student because he's enrolled in school. He's in one of our schools. He's at one of our high schools, and he is amazing. And he's a senior because he came with so many credits from his native country. And he's at risk of dropping out because he goes to school from 8 to 3, and then he works from 5 until 2 in the morning. And then he goes back to school. And he sent me a message a few days ago saying, I don't think I can do it. I'm just so tired. And he's just a few credits away. US history, US government, speech, and PE is it. So I'm cheering him on, telling him he can do it. And so now I'm going to say something to him in Spanish. And maybe the camera can move to the others. He's an unaccompanied minor. He doesn't have family here. And so anytime there's just, another adult, and in his case, his parents aren't even here, but an adult who cares, who's paying attention, who's checking in. Okay, so that's me and here tonight. Because since you're recording this, I'm going to send it to him, and I'll tell him where exactly, because he probably doesn't want to watch our whole board meeting. I'll tell him where exactly, and he'll hear me address him. And I'll also say something about how it's, Hispanic Heritage Month. and he's Hispanic. And so I'm going to say it first in English, and then I'm going to say it in Spanish about how the whole board and district is supporting him and knows that he's going to graduate in May, and we can't wait to give him his diploma. Okay, so now I'm going to address him in Spanish. Muy buenas tardes. Estamos aquí para celebrarte porque este mes es el mes de celebrar los hispanos. Y tú eres muy, muy especial. Y no solo yo, sino todos nosotros estamos muy orgullosas de ti porque sabemos que vas a graduar y vas a recibir tu diploma y nosotros en mayo vamos a entregarte tu diploma. Okay. Okay.
Dr. Tiffany, I'm sorry, Dr. Anderson, please forgive me. I'm trying to remember what our initials for ICC is. Intergovernmental.
Coordinating Council.
Thank you. We have that meeting this coming week, so we will be meeting and I will come back and report on that. That meeting is with Washburn individuals, Washburn University, other district superintendents, city, possibly city managers, Shawnee County commissioners. So it is a meeting to talk about the state of education. And that will happen this week on Tuesday. KASB legislative representative that I am will have a Zoom meeting to Saturday at 12 o'clock to finish up our document for your approval at the next meeting after that. It's already on the agenda. And special education funding is part of that. It will be our state legislative suggestions of what we think we need for education. And it will be highlighted separately on that document. Yesterday at another Zoom meeting with KASH, they just had a meeting to approve the minutes, but one of the things that all of the high school coaches and athletic directors, they all voted on whether to change the multiplication, reclassification for private schools and public schools playing in state sports. I'm hoping I'm explaining this well. We have some private schools that do a lot of recruiting for sports, and they continuously win the state championship. And so there was a vote, if we limit the amount of state championships they can win in their particular classification, then they would have to move to another classification higher to level the field. There was a vote of approval for that throughout the state of Kansas by all of the coaches and athletic directors. They approved that. It now goes back to the legislature for them to approve. And so that may occur. That makes sense. Thank you. This last week, a new TIF was presented to the council on Topeka Boulevard. The district has been in contact, I think I reported before, about explaining the difficulties of TIFs to our school financing. So we'll stay on top of that as things move. Think about your vote. Try to find, when we come to the voting, education friendly candidates. Because those are the ones that are going to help us pass those laws that we need, like special education funding. So do some research and make sure that they're friendly in education and vote for those candidates. It's highly needed. I think I'll save this other one for another time. I'll just save it. So I'm done.
All right, a couple of things I want to share. First off, I presented at the last DCAC meeting. I didn't count how many others of you were there, but I'm sure it was not 4. Let's see. Next, we have our finance committee meeting. We had that earlier today. We talked about all of the complexity of the funding algorithm, you might say that, and so there's a lot of things that go into that. But just as an FYI, one thing that plays a part into that is attendance on September 20th. So we'll be looking to see how many students we have in chairs and at desks in schools on September 20th. Something that parents still might not know that changed this year as opposed to in the last couple of years is that if your student qualifies for free and reduced lunch, it's not automatic. We just got to make sure if you still haven't filled out that worksheet, reminder to fill that in. There are funds available but we have to have that paperwork in order to make sure that we feed all kids who deserve it and who need that to to have a great day at school. Couple of more things earlier this week. I was at an event by United Way of Topeka, as well as the Young Leaders, Society, celebrating the donation, the 50,000th book donated to kids to help them read. This specific event was at Pine Ridge, and so it was young individuals who wanted to do good in their community, wanted to give back. And that happened about 10 years ago. And so there's 50,000 books that have been donated thus far and that are targeted towards these 3 and 4-year-olds. And so I think anytime we can get young kids to read, anytime we can get them to love exploring stories is a great effort and worth it. So I congratulate them and thank them for that initiative. And speaking of young kids in Pine Ridge, tomorrow is a celebration for Pine Ridge at 10 years, I believe. So I look forward to being there to celebrate the work that's being done in that part of Topeka and that community and the work that those staff do with the families and the way that they work to support these kids to make sure that they have bright futures. So that is all for me. Yes.
Legislate employ to decrease the amount of finance that school districts get. Good attendance is 95%. And so they're basically cutting back the number of students we get compensated for. This is maybe something else we can comment to our legislators. It's just a way to decrease the amount of funds in the general fund. Ain't fair.
Yes, thank you. Okay, looking at my agenda, I think we are at the end. Once now that we have comments as well as committee reports, looking for a motion to adjourn. All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? All right, second with Dr. Schumacher. All in favor? Raise your hand. Aye.
We need to vote.
Yes. All right. You haven't. I thought that was the recommendation that we make a motion to adjourn. Okay. All right. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Have a great day.